kick it off. Again, good morning, everybody. Today we're talking about the CISO Survival Guide to Managing Third-Party Software Risk. And it's specifically about third-party software risk. We're talking about commercial third-party software. So the software that you procure from trusted third-party vendors to help you run your business. So to introduce myself, I'm Joe Coletta. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at ReversingLabs, and I'm joined by my colleague Dan Petrillo. I say colleague; he's really my boss. But both of you we're joining you here today to hopefully walk you through what you and your business can do to secure third-party applications that are procured from trusted vendors. So just a little preamble about who ReversingLabs is at a glance. We just actually celebrated our 15-year anniversary. And over those 15 years, ReversingLabs has continuously improved our solutions to become a trusted authority in software and file security solutions. We have a threat repository of 40 billion files of both malware and goodware, and that actually continues to grow day by day, thanks to the good work that our threat intelligence analysts are doing every day. And then that 40 billion file repository is actually about 7 times larger than our closest competitors. It's trusted to a point where actually 60 of the leading cybersecurity companies that you're probably very familiar with, use our data as part of the solutions that they're likely providing to your organization. And we've received a number of accolades through our channel partner program, which we're very proud of. And along with being recognized by Gartner as a leading software supply chain security solution, and something that we're very proud of most recently is we were a direct contributor to data presented in the 2024 edition of the Verizon DBIR report. So that's something that we're very proud of, to contribute to one of the most marquee cybersecurity reports of the year. So something to hang our hat on. But with that, I'm going to kick it back to Dan to kind of kick this discussion off and get the conversation going. Dan, to you.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. And Joe, as Joe mentioned, we're focusing today on commercial off-the-shelf third-party software. And so while there's this notion that the world runs on open source, it has to be said and it has to be recognized that enterprises run on this third-party software. And I think a myopic focus on that open source software is leaving us vulnerable. So I wanted to mention a few of the types of software that are typically paramount to our businesses, that are crown jewels, as some might say, that are mission critical. If these are to be compromised, it's going to be, let's say, a rough day for those of us in the SOC and on the GRC teams. But a few of those pieces of software are HR tools, payroll, ERP, email, software development, file management. And I think it's pretty indicative of the challenges that we see are some stats that we're about to put up here. The first one comes from our own State of SSCS report that showed that there was a 1,300% increase in software supply chain threats from 2021 to 2023. We also have Gartner predicting a 200% increase in costs stemming from SSCS or software supply chain attacks by 2031. Gartner has also said that 83% of cyber risk professionals have found risks embedded within vendor applications after deployment. And last, from that DBIR report that was mentioned, we've seen a 68% increase in software supply chain attacks targeting third-party software vendors. So, in the slide before, we showed all those types of tools that we're relying on to run our businesses. To a threat actor, that's opportunity. And I think because there's a focus, the focus is not on these tools as a attack vector. That is what's causing these numbers here that we see today. And so we want to talk about steps you can take to start to deal with this growing threat of software supply chain attacks. So there's another reason that we're struggling to deal with these types of threats, and it's that the legacy solutions that you all have been presented with have no primary control. The main one that we're seeing is questionnaires that rely on truthful and accurate self-attestation based on an inherent trust model. And actually, I want to get a sense from the audience, how much do we trust the attestations of our vendors? You'll see a poll here pop up on the screen. I encourage you to go ahead and choose which of these you feel most accurately describes your sentiments around how much you trust or distrust what these vendors are saying about the risk associated with the software that they're trying to sell you. There might be some bias there. Who knows? I'll let this go for a minute longer, actually, and I'll talk through some of the other ones as well. Another tool that we tend to rely on is the SBOM. Here at Reversing Labs, we are big fans of the SBOM. In fact, we can help you generate SBOMs. But we believe you can't stop at the SBOM. They're really just a list of ingredients, and they're not identifying risks and threats. The next is pen testing. Pen testing is a fundamental practice to mimic a human attacker. However, it's too expensive. I've talked to a lot of large enterprises about how they approach third-party risk management, and they've told me that pen testing is reserved for a small portion of their vendors. And this leaves a lot of businesses exposed. Next is security rating services. These are nice to have, but they often convey a vendor's exposure with a rating and don't address real software threats. The last is sandboxing, which I think we know well at this point can be evaded by time-based malware payloads and other evasive mechanisms like recognizing they're in a sandbox and acting differently. They're also resource intensive, costly, and also not scalable to address all your threats. So with that, I'd like to end this poll and see what we've got here. It looks like we're kind of in the middle. There's some distrust, there's some neutrality, and there's some who mostly trust. But in general, I think, especially for folks who are trying to implement a zero trust model, if you're extending that to the software that you bring into your organization, we're going to have to come up with a new control that is going to allow us to verify. Maybe we can have a trust but verify model in place. And really, I think what we're seeing here is we can't quite rely on these entirely to have a warm and fuzzy that the things we're bringing into our organizations are not a threat. And these all feed into, these all feed into another challenge that I want to mention, which is SEC's new rules of disclosure, Form 8K, that mandates that enterprises must disclose cybersecurity incidents that pose material risk to customers. When you don't have a primary control in place, it becomes really difficult to have that ability to disclose potential threats, risks, to even know them as they are present to your own business. So a few of the reasons that I think we're seeing the numbers here. I get to do the doom and gloom part. Joe, however, is going to take us into the promised land of how we can move away from these threats and what we can do about these issues that are clearly present in the software supply chain.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Well, it's still a little bit of doom and gloom, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So we want to illustrate how these existing tools and methods create challenges for cyber risk and security professionals when attempting to mitigate risk across what we call what's known as the software consumption lifecycle. So that includes the acquisition, deployment, maintenance, and monitoring of third-party commercial software. So when acquiring software, businesses really struggle to gather relevant information to make risk-informed software procurement decisions because one, vendors are sometimes reluctant to share software composition data and risk analysis reports. Or two, existing third-party software risk reporting lacks the details about specific software solutions, like what Dan alluded to in the previous slide about, the inherent gaps in those aforementioned methods, and really kind of they're gaps in deciphering the software level risk. They might provide sort of a broad stroke risk exposure viewpoint, but there's the inherent gap is that they fail to actually decipher within the software package itself, what are the embedded threats and risks that I need to be worried about or concerned about? So once a software package is procured, the business need of that software is meant to fulfill the business needs often what that software is meant to do actually is often an afterthought in terms of doing due diligence. The business requires the software to be deployed to fulfill a specific need. So security of that software package is often an afterthought. When there's inadequate insight into potential risks embedded within that software, that means that the deployment team, whether that be their your IT operations, or more often than not, your security engineering or security operations team, is unable to implement the right systems and the right system and network hardening mechanisms to mitigate those risks. So if they don't know what they don't know, they can't input they can't stand up the proper controls. So maintaining enterprise software means that keeping an eye on how code changes to existing software deployments affect your exposure. And what I mean by that is, with every new version, with every new update, there are code changes that could present new risks or new challenges or new vulnerabilities that may be exposing your business to risk, even from trusted vendors. So enterprises need automated threat analysis to stay on top of those software updates, again, even from trusted vendors, because we've seen this take action in the real world. And lastly, traditional response plans for software supply chain attacks, such as new zero-day threats, involve a lot of active engagement with software vendors. Again, the vendors themselves may be overwhelmed or unresponsive during these types of scenarios, sometimes even combative at times. So this can significantly delay mitigation efforts. So not having that visibility on your end as the software consumer really helps. It really only elongates that reaction time in terms of a zero-day scenario. All right. So from here, I want to get into some of the stakeholders because this whole presentation is about discussing the people, the processes, and the technology. And we'll get into the technology bit definitely a little bit later. But we want to talk about sort of the people that must be involved. So again, another poll, if you don't mind. Which department in your organization, we want to know from you what department in your organization is responsible for assessing third-party software. And I'm talking, again, not only open source, I'm talking about commercial third-party software. Who owns that function within your business? Is it a joint effort, or is it solely owned by a specific group? So I'll give a moment for folks to input their answers here, because I'm really curious to see what the answers might be. But as that's going on, I'll continue talking as people input their answers. So what we found talking with a lot of customers that we work with on a day-to-day basis is that the responsibility of evaluating supply chain security risk for any prospective or new vendor may reside within the third-party risk management, your TPRM, or even your application security team. But the ongoing management and remediation of security issues presented by software will undoubtedly fall on a variety of business functions. So it is sort of a shared responsibility in that way. So as a result, it's critically important that organizations clearly define the roles and responsibilities within the organization to identify, detect, and respond and recover from software supply chain security issues that may arise. So this pertains to the acquisition, deployment, maintenance, and monitoring of ongoing software throughout the software consumption lifecycle like I discussed earlier. So this chart here, what I'm showing here, presents sort of a high-level RACI view demonstrating a potential distribution of responsibilities across different job functions, both within the IT, security, and also administrative duties within the business. So, for example, TPRM may collaborate with application security to establish the security requirements of any new prospective software vendors that your business may want to do business with or to procure. Procurement will be responsible for ensuring that those security policies, those security requirements are considered as part of the selection criteria. IT and/or security operations, or in some instances, your security engineering team, will ensure that those proper controls are in place for any known risks that may be discovered. But again, the business need outweighs the known risks that may be identified. And also your threat intelligence team, because again, we want to stay abreast of any ongoing changes that software may exhibit. So suspicious behaviors. So your threat intel team will monitor for any irregular or suspicious behaviors and flag those accordingly. So these stakeholders, titles, roles, they may differ from business to business, but this is really meant to illustrate what a potential workflow or what a potential distribution of responsibilities may look like. And we have our answers here. So based on again, some risk and compliance, not surprised that there's some ownership there. Application security, some ownership. IT actually has a predominantly the highest level of ownership in terms of monitoring third-party software risk, which is surprising and not surprising, again, because they are the ones who are deploying and monitoring within the actual within the environment. So yeah, if for anyone who said other, I'm curious to hear if you can specify in the chat what those roles are within your business. We'd love to learn more.
For one
But
of
let's
those, it
carry
looks like
on.
it's a joint effort. Third-party
Yeah,
work as each team is the expert. So
yeah,
a dispersed responsibility, which is always challenging. I sympathize with you.
yeah. More often than not, it takes a village. Too true. All right. So we talked about the people. Let's talk a little bit about the processes in terms of, all right, how can we get started today? And if we wanted to kind of tackle this, right away. So let's talk about some of the priority software categories that would be paramount. That would kind of be sort of the first candidates for onboarding into this a third-party software risk management program. It's really recommended that organizations first target analysis of software that is it should go without saying, that is most critical to the business, and expand this to a larger population over time using a risk-based approach. So this ultimately enables organizations to quickly uplift the security posture of business critical software, which would have the most financial or operational impact if they were to be breached or compromised in a software supply chain attack. So when we're talking about how to segment what kinds of software within your portfolio that you should really consider, some of the criteria you need to consider is, what is the criticality of the software vendor to business operations? So what would happen if there's any significant downtime with that piece of software? What is the breadth of deployment of that software? So again, the proportion of systems across your IT landscape that use that piece of software, the location of where that software is deployed or integrated. So is it deployed in a network boundary or within a restricted network segment? Is it air gapped? Connectivity and privilege required for installation. So is it a local admin, and is it only a local admin, or is it connected to crown jewel systems? And lastly, the level of current or historical investment to maintain that software. Has this software reached end of life? Is there going to be ongoing support for this piece of software? Because that will take into effect if there needs to be changes made on the part of the vendor. So we've talked about roles and responsibilities. Let's kind of talk about what are the fundamental steps to actually put this into action. So I alluded to this just a moment ago. Start by selecting your most critical applications that would be initial candidates for analysis. We do this to get a baseline of potential security risks as they exist today. Quick wins are important here. So what we've consulted to customers that it behooves them to limit your scope initially to new vendor applications. Excuse me. And as you begin to build a repeatable process, your scope can then be expanded to include existing deployments as well. The reason being is that, again, those quick wins are important, and you don't want to get expanding the scope too early to existing deployments can create an initial backlog that can be kind of difficult to overcome. So the best course of action is to create those quick wins up front with new vendor applications, refine that process, and then expand your scope as time goes on. Once those known risks are identified, or you have that baseline, you really want to work with your IT or your security operations team to really to make sure that those compensating controls and those environmental hardening mechanisms are up and running. And as this is happening, third-party risk management, your GRC team will consult with application security or other cybersecurity SMEs within your business to establish the security requirements as a key component of new vendor selection. So what is your internal policy that existing and new vendors have to abide by to maintain that contract standing? So again, what is the policy? What are the specific threat categories that you want to monitor? Things like malware, tampering, suspicious behaviors. Those are the sorts of risk vectors that you want to account for. And then also at the same time, consulting with procurement and legal to integrate those security requirements into your vendor contract language to ensure that security fixes are required stipulation for vendor agreements, so that when something is discovered, you actually have that legal footprint to go back to and say this is a requirement within your contract language or within your master services agreement, for example. And then lastly, once you've built that repeatable process, implemented to your most critical applications, you can maybe start to, again, broaden that scope, cast a wider net to your legacy applications and broaden that testing pool. Right. Dan, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So I want to take a moment to talk about how ReversingLabs, through our product called Spectra Assure, is offering a primary control for software buying decisions. Now, here at ReversingLabs, we find it's absolutely critical to assess the entire software package and to assess it without reliance, again, on just vendor attestation alone. So we offer a mechanism that allows you to ingest an entire binary comprised of commercial, proprietary, open source, as well as the artifacts that are pulled into the final build. We are able to analyze that with proprietary technology called complex binary analysis. That's probably a story for another day. But what that's able to do is submit what we call a safe report. That safe report is going to give you all of the information you need to know to make your buying decision, to feel safe with that software, or to maybe work with the vendor to see what you might need to do to improve the security posture of that which you're bringing into your enterprise. The safe report considers 6 key risks and is inclusive of an SBOM. So the first risk, and probably the one you most want to be sure is not present, is malware itself. But we'll also tell you if there's evidence of tampering, if there's opportunities for hardening, what vulnerabilities are present, as well as the ability to triage and prioritize those vulnerabilities. We'll tell you if that binary contains secrets or licenses. As Tim Brown, the CISO of SolarWinds, said recently about our product and our organization, the ideal case is that you're running ReversingLabs on everything prior to purchase. I not only get the SBOM, I also get insights into malicious code or tampering. So the idea is now you have a true control point to help you with your buying decisions, to help you with your risk assessment, to help you kind of open the black box that is this software, this commercial software, to address that risk, and that is done via Spectra Assure. If you go to the next slide, please, I want to show you exactly what that safe report looks like. Now, there's actually, you can scroll down on this page, you can click into many of these things, and we frequently offer demos in webinar format, or if you reach out, we'd be glad to give you a personalized one. But what you're seeing here on the left side, at the top left, that L5 fail is saying that ReversingLabs through Spectra Assure has determined that this software is not safe. There were 39 issues, 308 vulnerabilities, and God forbid, in this example, 3 malicious files. You'll see the safe assessment breaks that into those 6 categories I mentioned before: 2 under compliance, 2 under security, and 2 under threats. We assign a safe level from 0 to 5. This allows you to determine what your risk appetite is, and you could even tailor that depending on what the application's function is. Along the left, you can see more that you can dive into. You can look at behaviors. We are mapping techniques to MITRE. We'll show you signatures. Everything that you might want to know that was otherwise kind of hidden within the black box of commercial software is busted open and presented to you in plain English, so that you can make really informed decisions and to have this essential control point for dealing with third-party software. Joe, could you take a moment after this slide to kind of talk about how you might operationalize this and what a workflow could look like when you have Spectra Assure in place?
I sure can. So this is a workflow that we've actually established, actually working with a lot of customers and consulting with them on how to operationalize Spectra Assure within their third-party risk management, software risk management workflow. So these are again kind of an amalgamation of multiple discussions that we've had with customers and prospects, and really meant to serve as a starting point to begin an internal discussion on how your team can use Spectra Assure to analyze commercial software package as part of your buying process. So what this typically looks like is part of the acquisition process. Spectra Assure the vendor provides a software binary, because again, we don't require source code, so we don't need, there's no There's no all we require is the binary executable. Once we have that, you're able to kind of kick this off autonomously. So as part of the acquisition process, the Spectre Assured deconstructs and analyzes third-party software packages for threats, again, without requiring any source code. This helps on two distinct fronts. One, we streamline the selection process when assessing multiple vendors, and we're maintaining business velocity with a simplified go or no-go decision based upon the output of the Spectre Assure analysis. And because Spectre Assure can rapidly deconstruct and analyze large and complex files, I'm talking about multi-gig packages within minutes. Excuse me. This quickly helps to analyze software packages with frequent updates and patches. So I talked about this earlier. With every new patch, with every new update, with every new version, you want to make sure you have a regular cadence of assessing those code changes, those new versions, for net new vulnerabilities or net new threats that might be introduced. So that really helps in the long run to proactively stay ahead of changes of software risks, again, stemming from compromised software updates, because we've seen that manifest in the real world, where a supposedly trusted software update is actually a vehicle to deliver malware to any downstream recipients. So the final output, the SAFE report that Dan talked about, identifies and prioritizes the most critical security issues, again, like malware, tampering, suspicious behaviors, malicious AI models, which is actually a new addition to our platform. And that provides TPRM and cybersecurity, IT, a digestible means to communicate internally about how to implement the proper controls for known attack vectors. So something that an issue is discovered, there is an immediate fix available. This at least provides you the context in terms of how to stand up the proper mitigating controls to safeguard against those known risks. And lastly, is that you're actually able to collaborate with the vendor directly, because the SAFE report is shareable with those vendors, and not only with vendors, but with your auditors or internal compliance folks. You can share those SAFE reports directly through a time-based and private link, so they actually can see the same level of output as you are from the console. Right. And this actually manifests within a zero-day response scenario as well. So let's use the tried and true example of Log4j as an example. In the event that there is a new zero-day disclosure in the wild, we actually provide the capabilities through our SBOM UI, through customizable YARA rules to enable incident response in a timely manner. So again, when that disclosure comes to light, you're able to quickly query the affected vulnerability and whether that there's a direct exposure to if your business has a direct exposure to that vulnerable component and that threat vector. And again, sharing those SAFE reports directly with your vendor to say, hey, we found that we're exposed to this. There's this, again, we found that we're exposed to this zero-day incident. Let's say it's Log4j 2.0, for example. What is your team doing to mitigate this? Because my IT and my SOC team needs to put the controls in place until the fix is available. So sharing that report directly with your vendors helps to expedite a response from your vendor or vendors for that in that matter. Right. So with that, we've reached kind of the conclusion of this is kind of the wrap up to our presentation. So we have a plethora of other resources that you can reference if you want to learn more. You can check out our website. We have a dedicated SBOM page, kind of dictating, what our SBOM capabilities, but also what your business needs to do and beyond the SBOM to really assess for third-party commercial software risk. We have our white paper that actually discusses a lot of the topics as it relates to Spectre Assure and the capabilities we bring to businesses. That we bring to businesses in terms of how to mitigate commercial software risk, and we actually have additional webinars such as Don't Stop at the SBOM that I actually presented with my colleague Deval Shah very recently, and a blog published by our Chief Trust Officer discussing the SAFE report and why it is kind of delivering a new paradigm in commercial software risk assessments. So give that a read. And we actually just published today an e-guide version of this presentation known as the CISO Survival Guide, a guide to third-party software risk management. That is available on our website as of today. So if you want to, again, in addition to sharing this webinar, you can download the white paper from our website. It should be available on the website today. Love to get your thoughts and feedback on that. Share with your colleagues if you think it would be beneficial for them. So with that, with the time we have left, we want to open the floor up to questions if we can. Let's see what we have in the queue. Let's see. Dan, are you able to bring up the Q&A tab?
I am, yeah. So the first one that I see here is, are you able to generate Cyclone DX SBOMs? Yes, we do. So in addition to that safe report that you saw, that lives in URL format or lives in our web application, you can also generate SBOMs in JSON. We have SPDX as well as Cyclone DX format that you can store and share and use for compliance and the like.
We have another question coming in. You mentioned the safe report is shareable. Does the recipient of the safe report require a license to view it? And the answer to that is no. So we actually generate from your instance of Spectre Assure, you're able to generate a link, and that link is password protected, number one, and it's time-based, so you can actually set an expiration date and time for that link to expire, and then share that directly with your vendor through the console. And they do not need a license, they do not need a subscription, they do not need a purchased instance of Spectre Assure to view that. It is viewable through the shared capabilities.
Yeah, that reminds me of our customer who was able to actually get a vendor to fix their software by sharing with them the safe report. Really cool story.
Yeah.
Yep. One here, you mentioned levels in your software. How are those defined? So that's a great question. So we have what we call safe levels, 0 to 5. Our threat analysts and security researchers and product managers have spent a lot of time to associate the prevalence of those 6 risks to 5 degrees of in 5 degrees. So 5 is squeaky clean, perfect. 0 is I wouldn't touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. But we also recognize that different businesses have different risk appetites, and so those are customizable. So you can change those too to fit your needs. That's another great question. Thank you.
And I think we have one more. What is your recommendation if a vulnerability or piece of malware is found to get the vendor to actually fix their software? Very good question. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, is that it really does help. It really does help to work with your procurement and legal team to actually write that specific language into your vendor contracts. So I've actually going back many years ago, I actually used to be a consultant for third-party vendor risk management programs. And the one thing that having executive sponsorship, so having executive sponsorships from your CISO or even your CIO or even CEO really does help to get vendor traction, and then writing that directly into your contract language, so you actually can point to your MSA, to your master services agreement with that vendor, to point to vulnerability, timely vulnerability or cybersecurity fixes are necessary to maintain the ongoing relationship with with ABC company. So I would point to that as a tried and true method to make sure that you get a timely response from vendors in the event that threats and risks are discovered within your software.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. And thanks for sharing your experience there. That's it's good to have that.
Sure thing. Let's see. Any other last minute questions? Yes, our presentation deck will be shared. Thank you very much. Yeah, so this again will be available on demand. In that spirit, I think that's a good time to kind of call it a day. Thank you all for coming. We do appreciate you joining us live and in color for today's presentation. We sincerely hope this was valuable, and when we send up a follow-up email, we really do value your feedback. Like I said earlier, the CISO Survival Guide, Operationalized Third-Party Software Risk Management, our e-guide is available on the website right now. And beyond that, we actually have a great lineup of webinars coming up this month that we can hope you can join us for. And again, these will be eligible for CPE credits, just like this one today. Chris Romeo, co-founder and CEO of threat modeling firm Davici, will be joining by our own Josh Knox. As far as we're concerned, he typically goes by Knox in-house. So as far as we're concerned, he doesn't have a first name. He's just Knox, and we love him, and we just love him for it. And that will be moderated by our editor-in-chief, Paul Roberts, for a discussion about the concept of marrying your threat modeling operations with modern software supply chain security tactics to stay ahead of next-gen threats. Let's see beyond that. And later this month, we actually have a Halloween theme. It is spooky season, let's not forget. We will be doing a demo of our Spectre Assure platform with a Halloween twist added onto it, because again, spooky season, never forget it. Is your software supply chain haunted? So yeah, we'll be giving a deep dive into the product itself, into the platform, so you can see it live and in color, how this can potentially benefit your business. So with all that said, that's a wrap for today. Thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you in the next one.
Thanks for joining, folks. Joe, that was fun. Thanks, man. Bye, everyone.